This event is sponsored by Miro. Miro is the online whiteboard platform where product teams can work together effectively. If you don't know where to start, it's packed with over 50 templates for product teams. Whether you need a Kanban, mind map, retrospective, product roadmap, or user story map, we've got you covered. Try it for free.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen first. Thank you for having me today. Just to introduce myself, I am, just going back to where I started, I am actually a former software developer. When I graduated from college, I was a dev for 3 years, went to business school at Duke University, and then joined Microsoft as a product manager, marketing manager. Did that for about 4 years, and then did a crazy transition then to recruiting. I became an MBA recruiter and a college recruiter for about 4 years, then moved over to Amazon where I was a technical recruiter, a recruiting a client lead, and a recruiting manager for technical roles. And so I'm happy to be here. What the purpose of this conversation was really organic. So this has been a crazy year, and obviously with the coronavirus and the things going on, a lot of my friends and LinkedIn friends were laid off, and I'm a person who love to help people. So I started answering people's questions and helping out with their career search, and people have told me that my point of view and my feedback is not something that's really well known, like how recruiters work and how we think about the search process. And so I figured this would be a great way to sort of shed some of the ways we look at, as recruiters, look at the job search and look at candidates with the intent that this will help you, customize your search or improve your search as you're looking for a job or if in the future. So hopefully this will be very helpful. I will say that this, I do work for Bink, which is a hybrid consulting company for recruiting. We help small, mid-tier companies and some enterprises with their recruiting services. I am not here representing Bink. My thoughts, even though I'm wearing a shirt, my thoughts are my own. I'm not representing Amazon either. I left that company 6 months ago. So what I'm going to share with you is really my thoughts and my what I think about things. So what this conversation will be is very tactical. It's going to be practical advice based on my experiences, based on what I've seen from the countless of candidates and interviews I've been on. It's to provide context about how we work so you can work better through it. And hopefully I'm very transparent, so you'll get some truthful answers to some of the questions that you may not have been able to get answers for. What this is not, it is not going to be a resume workshop. I think there's a lot of them out there where they teach you how to write a resume and improve on that. I don't want to go into some of the details there. I will talk about some of the resume stuff, but not to this extent of like how you should structure it and how you should make certain statements and so forth. It's not really also a workshop on finding a job and so forth. I think it's more around answering your questions and providing tips and viewpoint, not necessarily like the end-all be-all for how to find a job. This is not going to be a very inspirational, motivational talk either. I'll be very transparent with you guys. I'll be very blunt in some cases, as you'll see later on. So I don't really have any parting words of wisdom other than the fact that it's going to be largely tactical. And like I said before, this is not going to be a primer on how to get to Amazon. I will speak to a little bit about Amazon and my experiences there, but not necessarily about how things work over there, or more importantly, what's the best way to get into Amazon. So with that, ideally, this would be a conversation. I would love to answer all your questions, and we did solicit questions. We actually got about 110 of them. And I will be answering them during the process, but please send Nikki your questions. We will answer them at the end of this conversation. I'm going to save about 30 minutes at the end, so we would love to answer some of your questions during this process. But first, I do want to cover a few things of just points to think about as we're talking about recruiting and recruiters as a whole. The first one is there are a lot of different types of recruiters out there. There are a lot of great ones, there are a lot of bad ones. There's a lot of recruiters in the world. So it's really, I think, important for you to know where your recruiter is coming from and what they're a part of, because it will influence how you work with them, but also how you're presented to the company, right? So recruiters as a whole are largely part of the HR process, although we are separate. A lot of companies will distinguish between recruiting or HR, which is largely around retention, promotions, compensation, really just about keeping everybody who works at the company happy. And then recruiting is about getting people into the company. So there's a split down the road, especially in larger companies. We have a lot of processes to go through. There are a lot of laws in different countries that govern fairness in hiring, how we ask questions, how we interview. So a lot of the work that we do is a lot of stuff behind the scenes. We coach hiring managers and interviewers on what to ask and what they can't ask. We work with them to figure out what roles they have available, what they want to hire, what their job descriptions are, their criteria, and so forth. And there's a lot of paperwork that goes behind the scenes about pushing a candidate through the process. The types of recruiters out there varies as well. So there's internal recruiters. So when I worked at Amazon, I was an internal recruiter. I was employed by Amazon. We typically get paid by salary. And usually there are goals for internal recruiters to make hires. So they're usually goal maybe 2 hires a quarter, or depends on the company, depends on the situation, depends on the roles. They don't really get paid per hire. Their performance reviews sort of depend on it, but not necessarily their compensation at the end of the day. There are agencies, contingency recruiters that basically look for candidates and submit them to companies. The companies go out and say, hey, we're looking for a Salesforce admin. Can you help us find that? And these agencies go out and find the candidates and submit them to the companies, and the companies run with them. They get paid through flat fees, usually based on their first year salary. They don't get paid if you don't get hired. There's RPOs. Basically, they are paid to act like internal recruiters if they need that volume. Usually it's through a contingency or a retainer. Bink is kind of like that, and in some cases in more of a hybrid format. There's retained search. So sometimes you call it executive search. So they're asked by a company to go find a VP of engineering, and they're given a set amount of money that they charge per hour to find this person. And then there's staffing agencies that really fill contract or temporary roles, and they get paid part of the hourly rate that they fill. So if you're a contractor, you get hired as an IT admin, you are getting paid $20 an hour. Your company's charging they're being charged $50 an hour, and they keep the rest of it. So the point of this is basically you should ask your recruiter where they're coming from. I don't think that's out of the ballpark. If they're an internal recruiter or an agency recruiter, you should know that, and it's different how they feel about it. You should ask them how they're compensated, and that way you can sort of know going in how you can work with this person. But at the end of the day, all recruiters really want to help, right? We want to hire you. We want to fill these roles. There are a ton of terrible recruiters out there, so just be careful. But we are part of the process, and we want to be your friend through the whole thing. So that's one area. The second thing to know is that as a recruiter, it's all about volume, and that applies to every role, whether it be a high volume role like working in a warehouse, or a low volume role like a CEO search. But at the end of the day, it's all about volume. We need to run a bunch of candidates to fill one role, and we need to do it simultaneously. A good recruiter will make you feel like you're the only candidate, that will focus on you, that will communicate with you on a regular basis and update you and answer all your questions very quickly. Bad ones will forget about you because they're dealing with 20 other candidates and so forth. This, if you've never seen this before, is a recruiting funnel. It's the way to sort of think about, to get one offer, one hire, how many candidates you need to reach out. The numbers are theoretical. I don't know where it comes from, but let me give you an example. So if internally we have an 80% offer accept rate, and for every offer, it takes 3 on-site interviews to complete, which means for every 3 interviews on-site, final rounds, you get 1 offer out of that. And then going back a little bit more, for every to get to an on-site, you need 2 phone interviews, 2 people going through phone interviews, so a 50% conversion there. And maybe when you reach out to a candidate to see if they're interested, to get them to interview is 25%. We're basically talking about, for every 1 hire, we're talking to 30 candidates at a time. Why is this going to help you? it's good to have that context to know what a recruiter is doing if they're not talking to you, and know that it is for us. It is all about volume, and the most important thing for us is time. So as we'll talk about later on, you'll see where that comes into play. The last thing I want to talk about is that hiring managers are usually very conservative in their hiring. I'm making a generalization. If you're a hiring manager out there, I apologize, but generally, hiring is about risk. It's really hard to figure out a candidate or whether a hire is going to be good or bad just by a simple 5 hours, 10 hours of conversation. We can't really see how a person works. It's a very unique situation. So it's always about whether taking a risk on a person is worth it or not. Some people talk about a hire having a blast radius, meaning that if you make a bad hire, what happens to the org? And obviously, the more senior the hire you make, so the more of a bigger blast radius. So, for example, if you hire a very bad VP, it will significantly impact your business overall. So that's why they're very, very careful about it. The ideal candidate, I would say, for a lot of these hiring managers is someone who has done the exact same job that they're looking to hire. And that's very unrealistic in a lot of cases, right? There are hiring managers that are willing to take more risks depending on the type of role and so forth, and they're very specific in those situations and to their organizations, and we'll talk more about that as a whole. So there's 3 points just to remember in the back of your mind that we'll cover. So I'm going to start answering some of the questions, 114 questions that I got. I grouped them together, so I won't be asking individual ones, but like I said, please send us your questions as we go through the process. And if there is a question about the slide I'm on, I've asked Nikki to interrupt me so we can answer that immediately. So amongst the questions I got from the 114, I got a lot of questions about resumes. So what should it be in a resume? How long should it be? What do I look for in resumes and so forth? So let me start answering some of those questions. So, and I'm not going to answer individual questions, but I'm just going to say, here's what I think about when I answer resume questions as a whole. So first and foremost, I get a lot of questions about does LinkedIn matter versus your resume? So the answer to that is, I know a lot of people spend a lot of time on their resumes, but as a recruiter, I don't get a copy of your resume unless you apply or unless I ask for it, or unless you send it to me, right? And I won't be asking you for your resume unless I feel like you're a viable candidate for the role. And the way I do that is basically through LinkedIn or through other places. There's other platforms out there that you can do it, but LinkedIn has become really the biggest platform for finding candidates across the board, small companies, large companies. This might be very US focused. I do apologize, but I think globally it's becoming a big thing. LinkedIn is you should not view it as a social media site. It's not a place for you to post your personal views or pictures of your dogs and so forth. It's really become your professional persona, so to speak. So I do tell candidates to make sure your LinkedIn profile is as robust as your resume. View that as your online resume that can be viewed by everybody else. The more detail you put in there, the better for us as recruiters to figure out whether you're a right fit or not, and you might get more reach outs. So first and foremost, update your LinkedIn as much as you can. I get questions about what part of LinkedIn do I look at, and it's really the resume pieces, right? So like your experience, your what you've done in each roles and so forth. I don't look too much at the skills or even at the recommendations or even your activity as well. I really use it as your online resume. I get a lot of questions around how much detail is necessary. I also have heard of people say, hey, you need to make your resume as accessible as possible so that the recruiters can understand what you're talking about. So if you have a lot of technical detail on it, that might not work. My answer to that is good recruiters will, even if they're not technical, even if they're not familiar with the product manager role, if they're doing a search on product managers, they'll eventually get good context. They'll see more and more and more, and they'll start to understand the details and nuances of it. So what we look for in particular are those details and that context of the roles. And so I really advise people to put as much detail as possible in there. We want to know about what you did, why you did it, the scale of it overall. Don't worry about dumbing it down for recruiters. We'll figure it out. In fact, I would say if you do remove some of the details to make it more accessible, it might look not as impressive for us recruiters because we might just move on. So one pagers or not, I think there is a understanding that resumes should be one pages, and that's about it. And I think the one page resume comes from the world where we used to, back in the Stone Ages, like from when I was looking for a job first, we actually printed out resumes and handed it out to people at career fairs, or put it into bins at schools and so forth, where one page is good, two pages is unwieldy. I think these days that, I mean, I think career fairs still happen, but they're less common. And especially if you are experienced a candidate, you're not dropping your resume, you're not printing it out to bring it to people, you're submitting it through a PDF and so forth. And so I think 2 pages is definitely doable. You should, especially if you have a lot more experience, you should, really put a lot of detail in it. And so 2 pages is totally fine. I think 3 pages is good as well if you have that much more. If you're a recent college hire, you shouldn't go to 3 pages. That just, I don't think that you have enough to fill it out. But I think beyond that, then it might be too unwieldy. But it's really up to you, and up to, there's not a right or wrong answer to that. I got a question about cover letters. Is that really important? For me, I don't read cover letters. When you submit your resume for an application, for instance, it gets attached to it like your resume as a PDF. It gets combined. There's no separate section for cover letters, and we ignore it. The only time I would ever read cover letters is if I'm confused on what the resume is showing me, and I may need more context. But largely, I don't really. I don't think you need cover letters. The one exception is that if you're submitting your resume, or you're reaching out to a hiring manager or a recruiter through email or through a LinkedIn message, your message, your body of the message should be like your cover letter, like a short paragraph. Hey, I'm interested in this role. I'm attaching your resume. Here's why I'm interested in the role. Here's where I could bring, and I'd love to be considered. That one paragraph will be good enough, and that should be the modern equivalent of a cover letter, in my opinion. So I'm going to go through some examples of resumes. Actually, I'll use my own first and foremost. So I blocked out some of my personal information, but this is my one-page resume from back in the day when I was at Microsoft. The reason why I want to show this is a couple things I want to call out. As a recruiter, I'm used to this format or something close to that. Very text-heavy, but sections where I can easily understand and find information. I know where to go to the top or the bottom to look for education. I know where to look for certain things. And I also want to call out, my bullet points aren't one line. I think a lot of people say you should have one line per bullet point. So this is if you're went to business school, you might recognize this as a business school format. Oftentimes people will say you want to have every bullet point to be a story, a star format: situation, task, action, result. So you can put a lot of detail into that. Resumes, in my personal opinion, a lot of people put their accomplishments. I saved X amount of money for this, or I launched a product which made this much revenue. That's great, but it doesn't tell me what you did, the responsibilities you had, the context of the role, and the scope of your role, which is what I want to know when I'm looking for you as a candidate. So I don't think your resume should be a place to list your accomplishments. It should be a place that tells me what you've done and the scope of you done, so that you can find the next role. So this is my one pager. This is what it looks like now with 2 pages. So you can see it's a lot of text, which is totally fine. I have 5 lines for some of my bullet points. So, but I'm going to go through some of the resumes I saw. I try to block out a lot of personal information as possible. And I'm, if one of your resumes is on here, please don't feel like I'm being critical for you. I'm just giving you some feedback. But the first one, a few I saw, the one on the left, not bad, right? List of skills, list of experience. The border is distracting. Why does that matter? We'll talk a little bit more about ATS in the future. But when you upload this to, when you apply, or when a recruiter uploads this to their applicant tracking system, the ATS, it gets parsed out. And a lot of these systems are crap, as in, like, they can barely handle PDFs. And so I have seen situations like this where the borders get mangled. And so if the resume comes through and is completely mangled, then there's less a chance or there's a more likely a chance the recruiter will just move on. Because again, we're focused on volume and we're focused on time. The one on the right, there's not much to share, but what I want to point out was that this bar on the left is kind of cool, but it takes up a lot of space, right? A lot of white space there that I think you can use more for other reasons. There's no need for it to be there. I think recruiters don't need resumes to be pretty. We need them to be predictable, so we know where things are located. So nice, but I think you can remove the bar and have a full page with the page of text. So next page, on the one on the left with the personal details blanked out. Couple things I want to highlight. I mean, I like the tools part, right? The skills part, sorry. Now, we were talking about ATSs as a whole, but like I think what this person was trying to do was put a lot of keywords in for parsers for ATS, or more for like recruiters that they're looking for keywords to be good. I have seen, by the way, I just thought of this. I've seen people put in office, and if you are looking for an office job, then that's probably good to have. If you're looking for a product manager job, that doesn't distinguish yourself, right? Everybody who is a product manager knows how to use Office. That's something you should call out. What the criticism I have for the one on the right, left, though, is that it's 2 columns. It did take me a little bit of extra time and to figure out where things are, and that little bit of time was 1 or 2 seconds. It might seem trivial, but when I'm trying to go through resumes as fast as possible, that does a little bit distracting. So not a bad thing, but just I think the 2 columns is not great. The one on the right hand side, again, 2 columns, concerns there. I actually made this one up based on someone I've seen. I'm gonna call out again just the colors, right? It's not necessary. It's a little bit distracting in some cases, and I'm also worried about whether it would come through when you submit it to an ATS or to a PDF. So that's not necessary. I'm not saying that my resume is what everybody should do in the world, but just pointing out just the things that I see when I see resumes. More resumes. The one on the left, I blocked it out as much as I could, but that's a picture there. So I think this is an international candidate. I'm pretty sure it's an international candidate and I think this is a pretty typical what I've seen in international resumes, because that's how it is done in their country. What I want to call out is that in the US, pictures are not common. In fact, you should not put a picture on your resume. And also marital status, I've seen that in some international resumes. If you're submitting it to a US company, remove that, right? It's actually very uncomfortable for some of the recruiters, and it's none of our business, right? So you should take that out completely. Also, a lot of white space on here. The first page essentially is not useful because there's not much information on there. The at a glance part is interesting, right? Like what this person did on the at a glance was basically summarize the resume in 3 or 4 bullet points. That's a technique, but actually I would prefer a statement, profile statement. Usually people put it on the top of their page. It basically says, and what I use the profile statements for is it helps me to figure out what kind of role you're looking for, especially if you're a career changer. I am a product manager looking for a technical role working on new product launches. You don't get that context anywhere else in the resume, and if sometimes it's really good to have that direction on the resume. The one on the right, again, very interesting. There was actually a picture there where actually no, there was a drawing, an icon there with some interesting things. That's not necessary. Too much space. And as a recruiter, I need to flip through pages more likely a chance of this person dropping out because I don't have time to review their resume overall. So I did a little bit of this before, but how do I read resumes? And I'll actually show you an example of how I do that. So the questions that I got are the top. As recruiters, we know what we're looking for because we've either talked to the hiring manager or we've reviewed the job description. So as we're looking through resumes, we are always thinking about a job in particular. Rarely will we look through resumes as in general and to try to figure out what job there are. Usually we're starting with a job first and then looking at resumes. So if we are looking through resumes in our applicant tracking system, we open a job and under that is all the candidates who applied to it. And so we're focused on one particular role. I'm trying to read resumes in 10 to 15 seconds because I have 50 of them to review for, and my time, I'm trying to speed the process and I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. So in that small period of time, I'm trying to basically figure out you, right? So I'm trying to distill your entire life experience into 10 to 15 seconds. So the context and the detail of what you've done is really important. What I do care about is, again, the roles that you had, what you've done in each role. Then I'll look at your profile statement a little bit to figure out what you are, or what I don't really care about. Sometimes I don't really care about those keywords. That's probably, some recruiters might care. I don't really care about it in these cases because I'm not just looking at keywords. I'm looking at what's in between the lines. And I'll tell you in a second. Sometimes I don't really care about your personal experiences or volunteer experiences, but that's just me. I'm really more focused about who you are, what you could bring, and whether you're fit for the role. The way I do things for resumes is that in that 10 to 15 seconds, I'm trying to, and this might sound bad, I'm trying to stereotype you into a candidate profile. So if I'm looking for a high-tech product manager, my profiles I have in mind is a product manager who is technical, a product manager who's been very experienced, a new product manager, someone who's out of college or relatively new, product manager who has worked on operations or back-end stuff, or a product manager who's worked on front-end stuff, or a product manager working from a completely different industry. I'm trying to figure out, put you into those buckets because those are the buckets I understand. And probably because I'm looking for someone who's technical and who's a product manager, I'm going to pull from that one bucket. If I can't figure out which bucket you fall into, I'm not going to try harder. I'm just going to move on because, again, there's a lot of candidates I'm trying to go through. So let me walk you through some of the resumes, and I want to talk about like where I look at and part of resumes. These are real resumes that were submitted. Thank you very much. I try to hide all your personal details, but I appreciate you volunteering your resume over. Again, please don't take offense to it. I'm just trying to be very transparent. So with this resume, the first thing I look at is the name. I look at the location, primarily because I want to make sure that this person is in the U.S. And if I'm hiring for someone locally, I want to do that. If they're not local, then I know relocation is important. Sometimes it's allowed, sometimes it's not, depending on the recruiter or the team. So I'll just keep it back in my mind. I then go straight into the professional experience. I look at what companies they worked at, their titles, and I want to figure out what they did in those roles. Then I might look at their education, and that's basically it. And hopefully I'll have enough information at that point to figure out. I don't go too far back into the resume review. I think people say two companies worth, 3 companies worth. What I also want to see though is the path, right? Where did you start from to where you are now? This person started off as an implementation partner, was a business analyst, was a product manager at Stanford, and then at the wireless company, and then at Royal Caribbean. So I saw their path as very interesting. It helps me to figure things out. It helps me figure out the trajectory as well, which is really important as a whole. So overall, this is actually well laid out. My one feedback for this person is I would like more context. If, as a Royal Caribbean product manager, what was your responsibility? I like that you put numbers in there. That's great. I still don't really know what you did there. The other thing is that, and you'll see later on, I know what TracFone is. I know what Royal Caribbean. I don't know if other people do, right? So it maybe context to put like what you did there, but also what that company does. If you have experience at Amazon, Facebook, maybe Royal Caribbean and TracFone, maybe not necessary. But if your company is a little bit smaller, like Report One, I don't know what that is. You may want to put a little bit of context, a little line there, and you'll see how things are going. So overall, this is not bad. I like it. So this person, 2 pages. What I love, so again, looking at a name, they're from New York, great. Their summary is fantastic. I know that they're trying to be a product manager, good project management experience. So I know what the direction is. What tells me to me though is that they probably not have product manager experience. And if I'm looking for someone who's senior, I'm going to move on very quickly from there. But let's go through it as a whole. What I love about this resume is they provided context. So you see the lines of a sentence. Those are sentences with lines, underlines. Those are really cool to have there to give me more information about. So overall, this is not too bad. This person could be really good for as a product manager for that requires more project management kind of skill set, or for internal tools overall. So, and then the last one here, what I love about this is that the context about what Pinhome is and what Hera is. It talks about what the company is doing. What did they do? It's really giving me great context about what they're doing over there. Might need a little bit more about what their role was in that context. I know they were interns a lot of different places, but it'd be good to understand what their project was, for instance, and then talk about your achievements and what you did there. Star Stories is probably a good thing to do there as well. So I get a lot of questions about like ATS, like how do I get through the ATS and so forth. So I think the comment on it's sort of spread around that there's these applicant tracking systems that take resumes and they filter candidates out, and you want to optimize your resumes so that the computer doesn't remove you from consideration. So in my experience, we don't use that I'm not even sure our ATSs have that, right? But we don't really use that because in my experience, none of them are very good. And it's not very reliable. So recruiters are really reading it manually, right? I've told a lot of other recruiters from my current company right now, and we're on the same page. Like, we haven't seen one that's really, really well. So I don't think you should worry about too much about what a computer does to your resume. I think, though, the basis of this concern is how do you focus your resume for a role that you're applying for? And I think the consensus is basically you should always focus your resume on a particular role. So look at the job description, make changes to your resume based on that so you can include things that they're looking for, either keywords or experiences that you can bring out more so that you can be considered more. So basically we're saying make sure you should be updating your resume at every single time you're putting in a role. It's a lot of work, but at least you know you can call out your strengths through the process. The big question I got, as you see here, is how do I transition into a product manager role? And I don't have a great answer for this, but I'm going to try to give you some answers. This is very hard. I've gone through a career change, and I think it's one of the hardest and frustrating things I've ever done. There is no magic secret. I'm not going to give you I can't give you a secret or an easy way of doing things. There's no single piece of advice that make it all work. It takes a lot of work, a little bit of luck, but really also how you position yourself. So, you know what? It's not easy, and I'm very sorry. But let me try to give you some tools that you can use. I said earlier that recruiting is all about risk, and hiring managers are very conservative what they look for. So, what recruiters look for is what your experience is like, what track you're coming from. You're coming from design, you're coming from the business side, you're coming from engineering, you're coming from a completely different career change, and the problems that you've worked on, right? Are they consumer problems? Are you working on solving a consumer need? Internal tools. You worked on internal processes, or internal tools. You worked on cloud problems or software as a service problems or B2B problems, right? We want to know more about that as well. You have to know, again, that when hiring managers are looking for people, they're looking for people who have done the work. And it's all about whether this person's willing to take the risk. So if you are a brand new MBA graduate looking for a product manager role, applying to a senior or principal product manager role is going to be very, very tough for you. Even if you have some significant background that you can rely on, it's going to be a big leap of faith that the person's going to do. So there's ways you can sort of, bridge that gap. The way I think about it is that you can do a function change. There's idea of a functional change versus a career change. A functional change is like you're going from a developer to a PM, or marketing to a PM, or a finance person to a marketing person. You're changing the job function of your role. The industry changes, you're changing industries. You're going from banking to consulting, or consulting to energy, or consumer goods to technology, right? It is very hard to do both at the same time. If you are an operations manager at a high-tech, a manufacturing company, you want to be a product manager in high-tech, that's a huge gap to fill. The best way to think about it is that you should try to do one of those changes at a given time. Change your industry, so going from an operations manager from manufacturing to an operations manager in high-tech, or a function change or a industry change, right? So you're a product manager, hold on a second, or within industry, you're changing the function. So you are going from operations and manufacturing to a product manager in manufacturing. The reason is that you're using some of your skill set to lessen the risk, right? Basically, you're trying to minimize the risk of me hiring you overall. It's really, and that requires to know what you bring to table and establish your competence in another area, right? So if you want to make the risk to jump to a product manager in high tech, then maybe you're looking for, and you come from a CPG background, maybe you're going to work on a tech that's a consumer product, or they're looking to expand or to work with consumer packaged goods company, like Amazon, for instance, and you want to work there. That gives them a place to establish that you have competence in, that they can gravitate towards, and then they can potentially train you for the rest of it, right? I want to repeat, the ideal candidate rarely exists, or someone doing the exact same job and the exact same role, the experience they're looking for. So they're always looking for what risk can they take versus what risks they can't. This also leads to the question of knowing exactly what you want is really critical. I have gotten a lot of candidates who come to me and say, here's my resume, what's the best fit for me? And as a recruiter, it's gonna sound weird, it's not my job to figure out what you want. My job is to help you get the job that you want, but I'm not gonna guess about what job you're gonna look for. Now, some people are saying, like, I don't want to alienate myself from other roles. That's all well and good, but it's up to me as a recruiter to expand that. If you're a great candidate, but not a good fit for a role, but you're still a great candidate, I'm gonna spend the time to find another role for you because I want to hire you, right? But don't approach it to where, like, hey, here's who I am. Can you help me figure out what I want? It's going to require some goodwill from the recruiter, and oftentimes they're pressed for time. The other thing, as you're transitioning to product manager roles, is target the right roles, right? So if you're a brand new product manager, don't apply for a senior role that requires 5 years of experience. You're most likely going to get tossed. And also, if you can, find the right roles that will get you to the path of a product manager. Take the small steps. So maybe not necessarily a product manager, but a product analyst, or something to that effect that can get you to that step. Always keep an eye on where you want to go, but take those small steps overall. Leverage what you know, and the reason why you can do that is that way you can start establishing competence. Hey, as a product analyst, I was really good. I know 50%, 60% of a product manager job. Now the risk is a lot smaller for me for making that transition. So Nikki, I'm ready for questions right now, but I just want to say it is very, very hard to do this. So always think about what the risk is for the hiring manager to take. And I will say, no, trust me, or give me an opportunity is not the right answer. I wish I could do that, but at the same time, I have potentially 15 other candidates reviewed that might have a better, more experience than you have, right? So find a way that you can minimize that risk for a hiring manager, and find the right role for you to apply to.